Well, sorry it's been nearly a week since the last upload. I've just been really busy with a load of stuff, but here we are back, and just in time for the Age of Sigmar 4th edition faction focuses to begin. And of course, as you might expect, they are starting with the poster boys of AOS, which is the Stormcast Eternals. These faction focuses are actually fairly in-depth. They give us a great look at some of the new units, some of the army rules, as well as the sub-faction style rules, which are now called battle formations. We also get a look at some of the spearhead stuff, but I am going to be covering all of those in a separate series of videos, so we aren't going to get into the spearhead stuff in this video specifically. It will just be the units, the main army rules, the sub-faction rules, and anything else they give us in terms of spells or prayers or anything like that. But yes, to get started, for the brand new Ruination Chamber Stormcasts, 4.0 is bringing a lot of love, and whether you are using these newer ones or the older Warrior, Vanguard, or Extremist chambers, you will all get access to the battle traits for the Stormcast Eternals, and as you can see, that comes in the form of 4 unique rules, which are on the face of it really cool. I really like how GW are doing this nice clean layout so you can see very easily when they come into effect, how you use them, how you target them, and what they actually do. So if we look at the Celestial Realm, that is done in your deployment phase, and it basically lets you set up some of your units in Deep Strike to come in later on in the game. Now, you can only do this if there are more units deployed than in reserve, so you can't just put your entire army into the Celestial Realm, but it does give you a lot of flexibility in the game to score faraway objectives or just make your opponent have to second guess where your units are going to appear. Now, following on from this, the Scions of the Storm is a rule that just lets you deep strike those units you've got in the Celestial Realm. So as you can see, in your movement phase, you can choose a unit that is in the Celestial Realm, and they drop into the board 9 inches from enemies. So this isn't going to be getting you guaranteed charges or anything, but as I said, this lets you get near to objectives or get in the face of an enemy to block charges, or just to disrupt their battle plans and appear where they least expect it. So it's a really good flexible rule that will just allow you to mess with your opponent's plans and tactics and just really disrupt what they were planning on doing. On top of that, the Stormcast also looks set to be getting a little bit of recursion in their armies thanks to the next battle trait, which is Heaven's Sent. This is a rule that, as you can see, is once per battle, and it's in your movement phase. You can pick an infantry or a cavalry unit that had more than 2 models and that has been destroyed, and it comes back at half strength, and you can set it up 9 inches from all enemy units. So for a quick example, if you say had 10 Liberators that got destroyed, you can choose them and they come back 5 strong to annoy your opponent all over again. Now, I think this is a really cool, thematic and fluffy and also rather strong ability. It essentially gives you some free points to, deploy somewhere and sneakily grab a faraway objective, or just set up another roadblock if you've got an important unit that your opponent looks like they wanted to charge. It is just really good. You can set them up anywhere on the board 9 inches from enemies, so it's not like they have to come in from a board edge. They really can be deployed almost anywhere you want them to, so it's a very flexible bit of recursion too. The final battle trait for the Stormcast is a once per turn ability, and you use it in each of your hero phases, and it is called Their Finest Hour, and this is basically like the 3rd edition heroic action, but instead of just being on a hero, you can do this on any unit, and you choose a unit and they get +1 to wound rolls and +1 to their save for the rest of the turn. So if you know that a particular unit is going to charge into a scary monster that you need to kill, you can pop this on them and they will not only be wounding it easier, but also they will be much more durable against its return swings. So I mean, just overall, I think these are some fairly solid army-wide battle trait abilities for the Stormcast. They are ones that are going to allow you to be really mobile and play some tricks on your opponent. They are going to make at least a couple of units really tanky and hard-hitting over the course of the game, and they are of course going to give you a tiny bit of recursion back just to bring back a half strength unit to score a faraway objective, or just to get in the way of your opponent and make a bit of a nuisance of themselves when they least expect it. But on top of those army-wide rules, you also get to choose a battle formation. And as I mentioned, this is like your old sub-factions, and they tell us about a couple of these. They do mention the Thunderhead Host or the Lightning Echelon, but if you are after one that is a bit more specific to the forces of the new Ruination Chamber, then what you will want to be looking at is the one that they show us, which is the Sentinels of the Bleak Citadels. And what this battle formation does is it gives you a unique rule, and what theirs is Ancient Aura. And what this does is once per turn in any hero phase, so this isn't just yours, this is both yours and your opponent's, you can choose a Ruination Chamber unit, and then until the end of the turn, that unit gets a 5-up ward save. So again, if you know a unit in your turn is going into combat with a scary enemy, you can make sure they survive a bit better, but also equally in your opponent's turn, if you are looking down the barrel of a very scary charge, you can potentially give that ward save to the unit that's going to be charged and make sure they survive. Or if you've got potentially a screening unit that is going to be taking the charge, you could put this onto them and try and make sure that your screening unit survives so that you can then in your following turn do a counter charge into that enemy unit. So it's a really flexible, really tactical little rule that will make your units much more durable. Although it's only one unit per turn, the fact that you can do this in every hero phase, both yours and your opponent's, does mean you can spread this around a bit and use it exactly where you need it to. And I think it combos exceptionally well with the battle trait we just saw of Finest Hour, which means you can make a unit that is not only +1 to wound so they can hit a bit harder, but they're going to be getting +1 to save and potentially a ward save. So if you do need them to survive, if it is your big anvil unit, they will just be really, really hard for your opponent to take out. We also got to see one of the new prayers. The article does mention that each army will not only have a selection of 3 heroic traits and 3 artifacts of power to pick on a hero and to really buff them up a bit, but also they will have access to a spell lore, a prayer lore, and in some cases even a manifestation lore, which is going to be for things like your endless spells and other summons. But for the Stormcast, we got shown a prayer, and what we got shown today is the Bless Weapons prayer. This has got a chanting value of 6, and if it's successful, you choose an infantry unit wholly within 12 inches of the priest that chanted it, and then until the start of your next turn, that infantry unit gets +1 attack on their melee weapons. Now, prayers are a little bit different now. You roll a d6, and that is how many ritual points are added to your total, and then you use those ritual points to chant prayers, essentially. So with a chant value of 6 on this one, you could, in theory, get it off turn 1, but it is quite unlikely because you would need to roll a 6 on that d6 to get 6 ritual points. What is more likely is that you will build these ritual points up over a couple of turns because they stack. If you roll a 5 turn 1, when you come to roll it again and you roll a 4, you will then be up to 9. So you can build them up and then spend them on your prayers. But with this one in particular, if you do use 12 ritual points on it, so you can't do this turn 1, but if you manage to roll a 6 in turn 1 and then a 6 in turn 2, or battle round 2 should I say, you could get those 12 ritual points and then spend the 12 on this buffed version of the prayer. And then what happens then if you do this prayer as its empowered version, it then instead affects all the Stormcast Eternal units wholly within 12 inches. So you can get a huge buff from this across a huge part of your force and get a load of extra attacks on a good quantity of units. It is quite a good prayer, I think, and I think it's one that you are going to potentially wait a bit on and build up until you've got those 12 ritual points, just so you can do a huge amount of frontage of attacks across a lot of enemy units rather than just focusing on one. Obviously, if you need to get one enemy unit dead and you've got one unit in combat with it, might just be worth going for the 6th version. But if you've got a big line of combats going on, this could give you a huge advantage across a big selection of your front line. The final thing we'll cover in this video today is a few of the new war scrolls that got shown to us. We actually did get quite a good selection. We got 4 revealed in all, with 2 big spicy characters and 2 of the more generic hero and infantry units. There aren't a huge amount of changes in many ways. There are just a few key differences here and there. There will be a lot that you recognize and that looks the same, but there are some things that are quite significant. And in my opinion, what we do see changed is for the most part much better and more exciting. And so what we start with is one of the biggest AOS models available at the moment, which is the big dragon Krondis. Straight off, if we look side by side, you can see he's gained 2 wounds. He still has his tasty 3-up save. He is a bit slower base, but equally he doesn't degrade on movement now, so overall I would say that is a positive change. Likewise on that front, he only has +2 to cast now, rather than the +3 he does in current AOS, but again, he doesn't degrade from that, he is just always +2 to cast. So again, rather than dropping from 3 to 0 as he takes damage, he will just always be casting at +2, so again, to me, that is overall a net win. In terms of his combat potential, he does lose his Calamitous Tail, which was his big horde clearing ability, but to make up for it, his other attacks are a bit better. His Apex Maw now always hits on 3s and wounds on 2s with a flat 2 rend and an improved 4 damage, but also gaining a pip of rend against infantry, so going to 3 rend against them, whilst his Talons are now 6 attacks rather than 3, and also wound a little bit better, being on 2s rather than 3s. So I mean, yes, he will overall lose some attacks into the really big squads of infantry, but I think overall he is still plenty punchy and he can still dish out a lot of pain to the bigger infantry units when he needs to. Each of the big monstrous units also has their own War Scroll Monstrous Rampage style ability, and Krondis basically has the current Roar ability from 3rd edition, so in the combat phase, once per turn he can roar, and on a 3+, the enemy unit or an enemy unit in combat with him can't use commands for that turn. So that is just a nice, relatively reliable way to turn off things like all-out attack or all-out defense and any other tools that the enemy might have needed when they are going into combat with him. Finally, he still has his Atavistic Tempest ability, which is still a spell. It is now cast on an 8 rather than a 9, but it does have a slightly reduced range of only 18 inches. You still pick an enemy unit and choose to make them either -1 to hit, -1 to rend on their weapons, or -1 to their saves. The -1 to their attacks for missile weapons is gone, but again, I think with that flat +2 all the time, you should be reliably getting this off pretty much every time you need it, and any of those buffs is going to be exceptionally handy for reducing the enemy's damage output, or just making them that little bit easier for you to kill. And especially against infantry, Krondis with his rend 3 into infantry, reducing their save rolls by 1 is going to mean that even the tankiest enemy is going to have pretty much no save against some of his attacks. Up next, we see the legend herself in Indrasta. She likewise hasn't changed too much. She still has 8 wounds, she still has a 3-up save, she still has that nice 12-inch move. She can't bring back dead Stormcast Eternals in the hero phase anymore, and her ward has dropped from a 4-up to just a 5-up. But in return, she has got a massively boosted damage output, and she really is now this focused, dedicated monster hunter that she is meant to be in the lore. Thengvar is now a missile and a melee weapon. It's got +1 rend against monsters and a flat 2 rend base, so she can get through a lot of monsters' armor, and the throne profile is now a much nicer flat 4 damage rather than the d6 it is now, so it is a lot less swingy. In melee, not only can she hit 5 times with her Blade of the High Heavens instead of the 4 that she has currently, albeit only wounding on 3s now rather than 2s, but she also in melee gets 2 attacks from Thengvar as well, which hit and wound on 2s, they are 2 rend and a flat 3 damage. So they are pretty good, but again, against monsters she is just amazing because her Prime Huntress rule has changed to just flatly double the damage of Thengvar against monsters. So now she can do 8 damage when she throws her spear, and in melee against a monster, she can potentially do up to 27 damage now, which means she could potentially one-shot Krondis. And even with average rolling, she will put around 11 damage into him in melee, following about 4 or so if she throws her spear. So again, with average rolling, she could do around 15 damage to Krondis in a single turn, which is pretty damn good going. Another passive she has is Dazzling Radiance. This just allows you to ignore negative modifiers to control scores. Obviously, with Battle Shock and Bravery going away, her current Hawk of the Celestial Skies rule kind of would be pointless, and this is a fairly nice replacement for just letting you keep hold of objectives that little bit better. Overall, she is just a very, very scary monster hunter now, and whilst the loss of her returning models in your hero phases does sting, I think she is looking much, much better than she currently is, and if you are looking for a pure, dedicated monster hunting hero, she, points dependent, looks like she is going to be a very good fit for that. On the more mundane side of things, we also get to see the Knight-Arcanum. This guy's had a few interesting changes, chiefly because things like endless spells and other manifestations are now actual units with a warscroll and stats. So he gets +1 rend when he's fighting into them, and he also gets some buffs to help negate their impact. So he has a 4-up ward against their damage, and he can also still prevent them from moving near him. So he's going to be pretty good if you are expecting your opponent to have a few manifestations on the board. He can not only kill them off much more easily, but he can also try to prevent them really having an impact on the rest of your army by blocking them or just scaring them off by chasing them down, because they know that he's going to be able to kill them so much more easily. And then finally, we have the chonky Annihilators. These are still your super durable Terminator-style Stormcast that just drop in and unleash absolute hell on the enemy. They are still 3 wounds with a 2-up save, and they've got 3 attacks that hit on 3s, wound on 3s, -1 rend, and 2 damage. So they're not bad at killing off other infantry, and they can also act as incredible anvils. Not just for that 2-up save, but they can also potentially force enemy units to suffer from strike last if the enemy charges into them. Their rule, Brace for Impact, means that you roll a dice for each model in this unit if the enemy has charged them, and if you roll any 6s, that enemy unit has strike last for that turn. So even with just 3 of them, you're rolling 3 dice. Yes, you're not going to get it all the time, but you've got a reasonable chance of rolling 1 6, so you really can deter enemy charges that might not want to take up to 18 damage into them before they get to swing. They also keep their Blazing Impact, which is still the same buffed version of Deep Strike. It still allows them to drop on the board and then roll a dice for each enemy unit within 10 inches. It has been slightly buffed. You roll a d3, and then on a 2+ on that d3 roll, the enemy unit takes that many mortal wounds. So it still goes off on a 3+, because on a d3, a 2+ is the 3 to 4 roll, but it means you can't just do 1 mortal damage to an enemy. It will either fail or it will guaranteed do 2 or 3 damage. So it's slightly better. Obviously, having to be outside of 9 when you deep strike means this does effectively only have a 1-inch range in reality, but still you can catch a few units with it and do some chip damage, or maybe clip an enemy hero and do, up to D3 mortal damage to them. Potentially getting 3 damage on a wounded enemy hero could kill them off. So it is a nice ability to have, and it can disrupt your enemy's plans if you drop these guys right in front of them, do a little bit of chip damage, and then just dare them to charge you, because you could just kill off a unit that charges into them before they even get to swing. So that is the Stormcast. As I said, we will look at the Spearhead stuff in a separate series, but so far I am loving what I'm seeing so far. The rules look really fun and really cool and exciting. They are so nicely laid out and really simple to understand and read, whilst still giving you a decent amount of tactical depth and flexibility. And I just really, really do like the look of the battle traits, the battle formations, the prayer, as well as all of the war scrolls that we've seen so far. But as always, what do you make of these? And what are you hoping to see from the rest of the Stormcast units? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.